students. Welcome back to the PMP course outline. Before we start, I'll quickly go through a quick recap. We have understood about the updates in the latest exam so far. We have covered the prerequisites required for the PMP. We learned about how to prepare the application. And finally, we have ended the presentation with a few generic tips that are useful for the exam. We will be going through the official document that is released from the PMI for the latest exam. This is nothing but the portion, or as some people call it, the syllabus for this latest PMP exam. So, for those who are hearing about the PMP exam content outline for the first time, this is nothing but a document which is released by the PMI in its official website for each of its exam. So, for CAPM, there is a separate exam content outline. So, for PMP also, there is a separate document, and it is released every year. So, for this 2022, there is one exam content outline released as the latest version. So what is mentioned in this document is an overview about the latest exam processes, updated versions of the exam pattern, and basically the complete syllabus that we need to look at for preparing the PMP. This session is going to be the complete overview of the syllabus. The most famous books so far for PMI for preparing the PMP was PMBOK Guide 6th edition, which is very nicely presented, and as you all know, it's a huge document, around 950, 960 pages. But there is a worry amongst students as the 7th edition was released lately. So they are worried that the content in the 7th edition is slightly different from 6th edition. As a matter of fact, it's not. The 7th edition of PMBOK Guide is not making the 6th edition as obsolete document. So in fact, if we do not go through the 6th edition, the chances are that we may not understand what is mentioned in the 7th edition. So why is this information important here at this stage? The exam content outline in latest version of 2022 that is provided by the PMBOK Guide, by the PMI, it's actually replicating the contents of PMBOK Guide 7th edition, right? So it follows its style of arranging the content in that fashion. So as we go through the domains overview, we will have much clarity about why I'm linking everything to 6th edition of PMBOK Guide. So today's topics are divided into 4 sections. First, in section 1, we understand the document, the exam content outline from PMI. And then we will start with the briefing of all 3 domains. The domain 1, as you already know by now, it's going to cover the people topic. Domain 2 is going to cover the process topic. And finally, the domain 3 talks about business environment. At the end of this session, you will have a very nice understanding of the complete PMP syllabus. And with this, you can plan your preparation to the PMP accordingly. So let's get started. The exam content outline. So what do we have here? The PMI says its content about this question of PMP, how these questions are divided is as shown here in this image, right? So what does it say? People, you get 42% of questions. Process, you get 50% of the questions, and business environment, you get 8% of the questions. So, and if you focus on the important note that is mentioned in the bottom, what does it say? It says about half of the examination will represent predictive project management approaches. It means the traditional waterfall methods, right? This is what I was referring to when I said PMBOK 6th guide. So it will be your Bible here. And it continues, it says, and the other half will represent the agile or hybrid approaches. Here comes the 7th edition of PMBOK Guide. So it throws some light in this area. So students, make sure you cover both these guides. They act as your textbooks for this exam. So they started editing the agile methods and hybrid methods because of its growing popularity in many organizations. The agile method mainly focuses on getting the feedback continuously from the stakeholders and then improving the process and then implementing them. It doesn't mean that they don't follow the traditional methodology. The traditional methodology is still followed, but with an added retrospection. This retrospective nature of this agile process is also attracting many OEMs nowadays. Anyways, so in the latest exam, we will be assessed if we can perform 35 different tasks from these 3 domains, right? So we have 3 domains and total of 35 tasks. Each one of these tasks are further divided into enablers. We will learn about what these enablers are in the slides to come. Moving on, Here we can see the PMI explaining what the domains and tasks and what enablers actually mean. Domains are designated as high-level knowledge areas. In PMBOK Guide 6, we have 10 knowledge areas. So they have divided or they have boiled down these 10 knowledge areas to just 3 now. The content is still the same, so no deletion has happened. It's just the grouping that has changed. The tasks are defined as the responsibilities within each domain. So the domain 1, it has 14 tasks. The domain 2 will have 17 tasks, and the domain 3 will have 4 tasks. So 35 tasks in total. Finally, the enablers, they can be considered as subtasks, or as PMI explained, the work associated with each task. They are enablers. So for every one task, you'll have enablers like this. They have given an example. For managing conflict, we have 3 enablers. So for each task, how many enablers are there? I've just given a quick summary here. As you can see, for people domain, we have total of 14 tasks and 53 enablers. And for the process, we have 17 tasks and 61 enablers. And for business environment, we have 4 tasks and 19 enablers. Right? So you don't have to get these enablers by heart, but it's better that you focus on the tasks. So the 14 tasks, 17 tasks, 4 tasks. So the total 35 tasks are important to us. There are when you total this 53, 61, and 19, we get around 133 enablers. So these tasks and their associated enablers, they are not arranged in a particular flow. They don't follow. If you recollect the process table from the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, they are all arranged in an orderly action in PMBOK Guide 6th edition. But here, it's not the case. In 6th guide, we can just identify by looking at the process what stage of the project that it could belong to. But in this latest edition, it's not like that. I found a few videos on the internet which arranges this task in order to follow the project lifecycle as per 6th edition. Like what phase of the stage or what phase of the project has which task, something like this. But if you ask me, I feel that it's really not important. I feel PMI has intentionally provided the tasks in a random fashion, to strengthen this idea about being agile. I'll be taking you through each domain in the same order that PMI wants us to learn. So stick with the course. Moving on is the exam content outline. What we have here is the little note about retaking the exam. The PMI says here that you can take the exam for up to 3 times. It means the first attempt plus 2 retake exams. So God forbid, if you do not secure the pass tag even after the 3rd attempt. So you will have to make sure that you have a gap of 1 year to apply for the 4th time. So, and the exam fee for the retake is going to be as shown on the screen here. Again, these values are taken on 1st of May 2022. They are subject to change due to some factors that are unimportant for this. So I hope the exam content outline is very clear to us. Let us quickly jump into the domains. Domain, what we will do here is we will go task by task for each domain. As I mentioned, first domain people will have 14 tasks, and then domain 2 will have 17, and domain 3 will have 4 tasks. So I'll take you through each task independently. Domain 1, task 1, managing conflict. Within any organization, to move things ahead and to get the projects flowing, you will have to make 2 or more teams working together. So a manufacturing team working with a team of quality, the logistics team working with the supply chain colleagues, coders working with testers. Many such examples can be given. So each of these separate teams are going to have their own priorities within the project, and they are different from one another. And if the teams are involved in multiple projects, these priorities are much different. So what happens when 2 such parties with different priorities join hands for a common task? There will be differences of opinion. I hope you all agree. So one team will say, we do things our way. Let's say the quality team says we need 100% inspection because it makes sure my customer is safe. And the other team, let's say the production team, they will say, no, it's important that the same customer that we're talking about gets all the required number of products as quick as possible. So we cannot waste time in checking the 100% parts. Hence, they propose we do a sample testing instead. So both of them are right from their own point of view, But when it comes to organizational benefits, both these options have to find a compromise. So now these little differences of opinion, if not taken care at an earlier stage or a smaller stage, they will grow and then they will start becoming conflicts. The conflicts are serious disagreements between two stakeholders or two teams. So I said stakeholders here, and it doesn't mean both these stakeholders have to be from different teams, but the conflicts can also happen even within the team. So imagine some work is given for two colleagues because it's too difficult to be handled alone. So if you do not define the deliverables of each of these colleagues, there will always be conflicts. Also the case when the work of a stakeholder is dependent on the work of another stakeholder, and then there is a constant delay in the delivery because of which the work of the other stakeholder is getting delayed. So that's another reason for conflict. So the project manager has to solve these conflicts. In fact, this is one of the most important purposes of having a project manager's role in the organization. I hope you all agree. And the PMI expects the project manager to solve this task of conflict management using the three enablers mentioned here. What does it say? Interpret the source and stage of the conflict, and then analyze the context for the conflict, and then evaluate or recommend or reconcile the appropriate conflict resolution solution. Interpret the resource and the stage of the conflict, right? We need to identify the root of the problem and to what level this has gone to. If the stakeholders has already escalated these things to a higher level, it's much worse to handle. So we need to be involved in the disagreement as early as possible. And we as project managers need to analyze the context to understand what actually started the conflict. And finally, we need to also recommend a solution to the problem. Remember one thing here, as a project manager, you are not the expert of the functional area, right? We all know, and even the teams know that you are not an expert of that problem. So when we say we need to resolve the conflict, it doesn't mean that you have to sit down and resolve the coding error. So you have to bring both the stakeholders or teams together and then make them clear, the misunderstanding. I know it sounds very difficult to bring two people to come to an agreement. We'll learn about how to deal with these. We'll go much into detail about what these different stages of conflict are. How we can interpret the conflict, when we should be escalating these things, what actions for what type of conflicts. We move to the next topic. Domain 1, task 2. This task is one of the biggest tasks from the list that we have from PMI for the exam. So as you can see, there are 7 enablers to perform this task. Let's see how it goes. So as every individual team is busy doing their own momentary work. So the individual stakeholders usually are not always worried about the final outcome of the project. It might sound, a bit harsh to put it this way, but that's the reality. And it doesn't mean that the stakeholders has no vision towards the work. It is clear for the stakeholder about what work she needs to do by the end of the day or by the end of the week, or maybe work that she needs to do to pass that review with the boss. She's always after those burning issues that is stopping her work. These daily hustles of individuals, of all the stakeholders within the team, are quite random and directed in every possible direction. So to move them all in one single direction, the project manager, he first have to get them on his board to the journey that is unidirectional. So this way, everybody will have a common goal, a common purpose, and all the work done by each member in the board is going to take the whole organization forward in that desired direction. Too much philosophy, right? I know. So how does PMI wants us, the project managers, to do this? I'm reading out loud the task and the enablers. So for leading a team, we have to set a clear vision and mission. We have to support the diversity and inclusion. We have to value the servant leadership. We have to determine an appropriate leadership style. We have to inspire, motivate, and influence the team members or stakeholders. We have to analyze the team members and the stakeholders' influence. We have to distinguish the various options to lead various team members and stakeholders. Moving on, domain 1, task 3. This is a bit interesting topic. We all agree that the project manager is not the boss of individual teams. The role of the project manager is mainly to ensure that the team gets the direction, to make sure that the people are getting all the resources, and to ensure that the organization needs are met. But the PMI wants the project manager to evaluate the team. So that's the interesting part, because as a project manager, you need to manage the individual against her deliverables towards the project, and then help her understand where she is in terms of her goals and targets against that particular project. So this assessment, it will be different than what her boss would assess her, but it will actually help the team or the individual stakeholders to understand if we are actually slow in the process, or if we are not meeting the level of quality of the deliverables, and they can work on improving themselves with these assessments. When an individual does a self appraisal, or the appraisal with her manager, only the individual performance with respect to her own work is assessed. But as the project manager, we always have to make this assessment in terms of achieving the objectives of the project. So let's see what the PMI wants us to do in this task. Support team performance. Appraise the team member performance against the key performance indicators. Support and recognize team member growth and development. Determine appropriate feedback approach, and verify the performance improvements. All right, moving on. Domain 1, task 4, empowering the team members and the stakeholders. You have all come from reputed organizations. You must have seen how a particular stage of the project, some of the teams have less work and some of the teams are overloaded. Let's take the example of the beginning of the development cycle of an example project. Let's say a bicycle is being made. So at the start of the development, the project teams, the design teams, the procurement teams, they're all very busy. They're all running around, moving things, blocking the meeting rooms, shouting over the phones, working late hours. But the logistics teams or the after sales teams, on the contrary, they might not even be bothered about what is happening in this new project, because they have their own regular work. They keep managing their running product operations. So similarly, when the logistics teams or sales team are busy, the designer need not be busy. So this was an exaggerated example to convey that not everyone is busy at the same time, and that's okay. But consider a case where within the busy team itself, there are a few stakeholders who are involved in the project, but they are not contributing enough. Yeah, not because they don't want to, but because nobody gave them any task to do. I might be really good at making wheels for a bicycle, but nobody asked me to make one. So what I'll be doing, I'll be just watching the person who is really good at making brakes, and he is making the wheels. So this is where the project manager's help comes handy. The project manager has to understand who is good at what and how to make people responsible and make them empowered. Task delegation is not an easy job, as I quoted on my example. If we do not know who is good at doing what, the project is not going to meet the deliverables. So for the exam, what does the PMI wants us to do? Organize around the team strengths, support the team tasks accountability, evaluate demonstration of task accountability, determine and bestow levels of decision making authority. So you learn about the task delegation methods and other stuff that's mentioned here in the lessons to come. And also you can see some example questions here. Have a quick read and expect such questions in the exam. Okay, moving on. Domain 1, task 5, ensure training. Every organization will have its own set of tools, which could be sometimes common and similar to the ones that are used across the industry. And sometimes that's not the case, and it can have its own tools. So for a person who has newly joined in the team, who is really good at some tool to do the same work, he or she is welcomed by a new tool which is similar to, or maybe not so similar. Take an example of an analysis software, FEA analysis. A person is really good at simulating with the help of, let's say, ANSYS. It's a FEA software, and the new company uses SolidWorks. For those who don't know what these softwares are, don't worry, they are both just two different tools to perform the stress or the mechanical analysis of a product while it is loaded. Not important for our topic here to discuss what they actually are. So let's put it like this. So the person who is well versed with software A has to now work on software B, which also does the same job. So what happens here is that the stakeholder takes his own sweet time to understand the things and getting used to the software, and he spends a lot of time learning the software instead of actually contributing to the project. So if this person is trained to use the tools with the help of an expert, that things will start moving faster, because we as a project manager have removed that impediment which is slowing the work down. Get it? So the project manager has to know how to understand these levels of competence, and must be able to understand which of the stakeholders need which type of training that could turn that could in turn help the project. There are a few competency analysis methods that project manager should know. Using these, he can understand the level of the training that the team needs. So let's have a look at what PMI actually wants us to do in this task. Ensure the team members or stakeholders that are adequately trained, and we have to determine required competencies and elements of training. We have to determine training options based on the training needs. We have to allocate resources for the training, and then we have to measure the training outcomes. Also, again, please take a look at the examples. Just try to get a feel of how and in what direction the questions can arrive. Moving on, domain 1, task 6, building a team. Here, there are two situations. In situation 1, you are developing a team from the scratch. And in situation 2, you have to use the team that is just given to you to use them for the project needs. I feel situation 1 is more easier to handle because as you get a chance to assess the team's skill set, like how we discussed in the previous topic, and then to train them to use them to our project. Also, if you are the project manager in that organization for a really long time, you don't even have to spend a lot of time understanding who that guy or lady is for the job. So, and you can build your dream team as per your requirements. In the situation 2, where you are just given the team, the things will get a bit difficult because we have to accept the level of expertise each person has and then make them a training plan. And before even we make the training plan, we have to make them agree that they need training. So to me, that's a really tough job in this situation. As a project manager, you have to always be aware that not all the team members are suitable for the task. It's nothing wrong. It's just the way any organization works. There will not be tailored solution makers ready for us. We have to get them to that point. So similarly, some teams together may not be suitable for the task. The whole team is not suitable for the task. So as a project manager, we need to assess the knowledge requirements of the team, and we have to know what trainings we have to give. Sometimes a project will be handed over from one team to another, right? So in this case, what knowledge transfer we need to give to the team that has handed over the project, that is also important. So we will be needed to start the knowledge transfer sessions, arrange them for the team to be ready with all the information that is necessary. We'll have to create a team building meeting, and follow the team building methods also that would create the sense of team within the stakeholders. Okay, that's about it. Let's quickly go through what PMI wants us to take care of in this task. So while building the team, we have to appraise the stakeholder skills. We have to deduce the project resource requirements. We have to continuously assess and refresh the team skills to meet the project needs. And then we have to maintain the team and knowledge transfer. And again, before we move to the next, what does PMI mean by impediments? Any sort of hindrance or any obstruction in doing something, that is an impediment. Like it's something which keeps us from the flow, like a hiccup when we speak, or a diversion on the road. The more impediments we have, the slower the project is going to run. So as a project manager, our job is going to identify these obstacles, prioritizing them, and solving them. And don't take these impediments as something unwanted for the project. Like you should always expect them, right? So these are not additional work. The project management is all about solving these impediments, right? It is one of our main responsibilities if we are the project manager. So we have to expect these and work towards solving them. And what are these impediments? The impediments in a project could be like the delay in decision from the management. There could be a quality issue, or there could be delay in the test result. Sometimes these impediments could be the whole team. Consider there is a situation, you are changing something disrupting in the organization, like upgrading to Windows 11. So from Windows 10, you are upgrading the software or the whole organization to Windows 11. And then the whole coding team is against it because the team thinks that the software that they are using, it's not going to work as quickly as it used to work in Windows 10. It's just an example. Windows 11 is great. So let's see what PMI says here. So in this task, we have to determine critical impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team. We have to prioritize the critical impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team. We have to use network to implement solutions to remove impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team. And we have to reassess continually to ensure impediments, obstacles, and blockers for the team are being addressed. So that's about it. You can have a look at the example questions, and then we can move on to the next topic as you're done. Moving on, domain 1, task 8, negotiating project agreements. PMI has given this as a task, but if you ask me, this has to be the basic necessity of being a project manager. So with the overview of tasks that I've given to you so far, you must be already aware about how many different teams a project manager has to deal with. So starting from the very first stage of the project of initiation to the very last stage of the project, the closing stage, every activity of a project manager will face criticism. So this criticism is quite healthy. It should not be taken in a negative sense. A project manager has to be able to debate with these critics and then make them understand why you are proposing a task that needs to be done. Why have you set the targets in that way? Why should we do these additional testings for the product? Everything is going to be discussed at different stages with different people, and the project manager has to negotiate these agreements, right? There is no way around. Sometimes you also have to negotiate with the higher management to accept a change, and in this case you have to be acting as a supporting member of the team, and sometimes it's the other way around, right? So you have to negotiate with the team supporting the decision from the higher management. So you have to negotiate with the suppliers and the customers both. So you name them, you have to negotiate them. Okay, so considering the task, what is expected of us from PMI, we have to negotiate the project agreements with the help of these 5 enablers that we see here. First, we have to analyze the bounds of the negotiations for the agreement. We have to assess the priorities and determine the ultimate objectives. We have to verify the objectives of the project, whether the agreements are met. We have to participate in the agreement negotiations, and then we have to determine a negotiation strategy. So as I told again, I have mentioned the key points that you have to learn, and then questions that you might expect from the PMP exam. Moving on, domain 1, task 9, collaborating with stakeholders. The English dictionary meaning of the word collaboration is actually an action of working with someone to produce something. So the word produce has some importance here. We all work together in a team, right? So a project is very rarely handled by a single person. It's usually a team's job, right? So even if the project is so small and you are the only person working on it, you still have to collaborate with either the customers or maybe even the vendors. So a designer has to collaborate with the testing team to understand the correctness of a design, and a production engineer, he has to collaborate with the quality engineer to understand the effectiveness of his manufacturing process. So many examples can be given. So as a project management task, what we have to do, let's read it from PMI. So in this task, we have to evaluate the engagement needs for the stakeholders. We have to optimize the alignment between the stakeholder needs, expectations, and the project objectives. We have to build trust and influence the stakeholders to accomplish the project objectives. Moving on, domain 1, task 10, building shared understanding. So this task is, all about removing the confusing statements or misleading directions between the stakeholders. As a project manager, we have very fair understanding about what to deliver, when to deliver a task, and what is the level of the quality that we need. But this understanding may not be the same understanding with all the stakeholders that you are going to work with. So I remember a very famous joke here. So it goes like this: a wife tells her husband, "Honey, go to the supermarket and bring a liter of milk. If they have X, bring 12." The husband brings home 12 liters of milk because the supermarket had eggs. So that's a classic example of not having a shared understanding. The husband did his job and also followed the instruction from the statement, but the expectations from the wife were different. She actually meant 1 liter of milk and 12 eggs. So within a team, the project manager has to ensure that all the instructions are clear enough for the meeting, for all the requirements as per the customer's expectation. So let's see what the PMI wants us to do here. Task 10, build shared understanding. We have to break down the situation to identify the root cause of the misunderstanding. So as a project manager, we have to contribute to also identifying where this understanding is lost. So because we have to stop it from getting repeated again. We have to survey all the necessary parties to reach the consensus. If there is a miscommunication or misunderstanding, we have to bring both the parties together and then make them understand. We have to support the outcomes of the parties agreement. Once the both parties come into an agreement, we have to support them. It might, when we say support, it might also involve some relaxation in the budget or getting a new timeline. All these things we have to agree again based on the project needs. And finally we have to investigate the potential misunderstanding. Potential misunderstandings is the misunderstandings that could happen, right? So we also have to contribute there. Again, on the left we have some hints or bullet points where you can focus while you're learning this task. And on the right you have some example questions, right? In this task, how a question might come. All right, moving on. Domain 1, task 11, engage and support virtual teams. So since last 2 years, we have seen a phenomenal growth in the virtual working style. So the COVID outbreak has taught the companies and the employees how the very complex task can also be handled working from our homes. Nowadays, the offices are reopened, yes, but the employees and the companies both, they are actually in favor of hybrid working styles, where some days the employees get to work from home even after the COVID. The virtual teams can be bigger than the office, right? So if you have an office space for 100 people, let's say, the virtual team could be 150. So more work can be done in less time and less office management costs. Okay, there are so many pros and cons to the virtual way of working, but that's not something to be discussed here in this topic. So the working nature of this virtual style has its own special needs and requirements, be it in terms of facilities that they need, or be it in terms of the meeting times and even monitoring what the virtual team is doing. It's quite challenging. So it is the project manager's duty to make sure you engage with these virtual teams, to support them in different occasions. So the work goes like this. So let's see what the PMI is expecting us to do here. Engage and support virtual teams. We have to examine what the virtual team members need. We have to investigate the alternatives, like a new communication tools might come. The Zoom call is emerged during the COVID times, right? So implement the options for virtual team member engagement. We have to continually evaluate the effectiveness of the virtual team member engagement. So that's about this task. So again, just have a look at what points that you have to learn for this task. And here are some example questions that might come in this task. Okay, moving on. Domain 1, task 12, defining team ground rules. So this task is all about setting and maintaining the etiquette within the organization. So not just about being polite to the fellow stakeholders, but also to define when to be formal and when can one be casual. Let's take an example here. Imagine a customer has invited an engineer who is working on the after sales team to present on his product and the customer premises. You can think of like 50 people are going to listen to this presentation. In such a prestigious opportunity, the engineer who was selected, the after sales person, he has to take this presentation in the company designed presentation format only, right? So he cannot just casually open a random Microsoft PPT slide, and then he cannot just give the presentation because he's going to represent the whole company when he's giving that presentation, right? So some rules has to be followed. Similarly, when we get an email from a colleague within the same team, we sometimes tend to answer it the casual way, or we may not even reply to her, right? So we'll just ping them on the chat box, or maybe we will just walk to the table and then answer her. But imagine when a email comes from a functional leader, let's say the chief technology officer or from the top management has asked you for a status of a project, right? So you cannot just simply ping him in the chat, say, hey, what's up? The job is still not done. So we cannot do that. We have to follow some ground rules in the company. So these are very simple examples that I've given here to bring the understanding of the task. But what is expected us with the project manager in terms of PMI is as shown here. Task 12, define team ground rules. We have to communicate organizational principles within the team and the external stakeholders. So we have to establish an environment that fosters the adherence to the ground rules. So everybody has to follow whatever these ground rules are for that particular company. You don't have to be really strict, but because everybody knows, once you say that there are ground rules, 99.99% of everybody, except the ones who are really notorious, they will follow all the ground rules. We have to help in managing and rectifying the ground rule violations also. Right? Somebody is reluctant to follow the one, as I said a little while ago. So we have to define what could be the consequences of not following these rules. Okay, so this sounds quite generic, but I have formulated what things that you have to learn to answer the questions from this task, and also a few examples are given here. Okay, moving on. Domain 1, task 13, mentor relevant stakeholders. Mentorship is all about helping and guiding the other stakeholders about work. If there is a new team member who joined the team, she may have enough knowledge to handle the complex to complex tasks. But when she joined in your company, she still needs some time to understand the product that your organization is working on. The ways of the company are new to her. The documentation processes are new to her. The general meeting frequencies are new to her. She may not know when is the next meeting. So there are many new things that the new colleague may not know. So it is important for the project manager to take care of such people who needs this mentoring. This is quite different from training. Training only teaches how to work on a tool or a process, but this mentoring is more about being quite empathetic towards that person with lesser awareness, and grow his or her understanding about the process. Now, does this mentorship only happen one way, from senior to junior? No, I'm afraid not. Due to the continuously changing technology, the youngsters are actually more aware of the current trends than the seniors. So, as a part of cultural change, we also get to see some companies follow reverse mentorship, right? You might have heard this word, reverse mentorship. So, it goes both ways. So, as a project manager, you have to ensure that the identified mentors are able to allocate some time apart from their busy project work and other regular works for mentoring the mentees. So let's see what we are expected to do in the task. Mentor relevant stakeholders. We have to allocate time to mentoring. As I said, this is really important because mentoring doesn't come in our calendar, guys. Right? So it has to be separately allocated, and it's important that the project manager identifies both the parties who is going to give the knowledge to whom. And then, yeah, as I said, we have to recognize and act on the mentoring opportunities. We have to identify that, okay, at this location, the junior engineer or the senior engineer needs something important, needs the mentorship. So to answer the tasks better, you have to focus on these points here in the learn column. And then you can also see some examples that might come as questions in your PMP exam. Moving on, the last task of domain 1 people, promoting emotional intelligence. This, in my opinion, is a soft skill that is needed by the project manager. So every stakeholder comes from a distinct and a different personal background, right? So they have different personal background, they have different cultural background. In fact, today the earth is it's going at a really faster pace to become a global village. A few decades down the line, with so much of migration happening in and around the growing metropolitan cities, every city, every organization is going to have people with multiple cultures and backgrounds. So even the virtual teams, as you can see, many companies are multinational now. So it's even today, you don't have to wait for many decades. Even today, it's quite rare to find a team where everyone in the team are coming from the same city or from the same geographical territory. So with such diverse, rich cultures and rich teams, there is definitely going to be a difference in the emotional intelligence. So one person might react very quickly to a joke, and someone else from the same team might take it very lightly. So there are going to be a lot of misunderstandings, even when the original intentions are not to hurt anyone. So if someone is emotionally hurt, or somebody feels not connected with the team, the project work is not going to move on a collaborative way. So there will always be a barrier on communication between the two parties who are not emotionally connected. So there could be some really angry people in the team also. There is somebody who keeps on shouting at others for no reason, right? So you have to deal with such parties also. In this case, the one who shouts and the one who is getting shouted at. Now imagine somebody shouting at the project manager himself. So you have to be emotionally intelligent yourself also to handle the argument smoothly. So both things are important. You have to be emotionally intelligent yourself, and also you have to promote being emotionally intelligent for your stakeholders as well. So what is expected from us in the exam point of view, you can see here, we have to assess the behavior through the use of personality indicators. We'll learn about these personality indicators in the lessons to come. And then we have to analyze the personality indicators and adjust to the emotional needs of the key project stakeholders. So to answer the questions better, we have to learn about emotional intelligent attitude. We have to assess the feedback from the stakeholders' behavior. All these things I have formulated. Please take a look. Moving on. Until now, in domain one, we have spoken about people, everything that is related to the people activities. In domain two, the tasks will be more focused on the process. So now the focus will shift from people activities to process activities. Let's see how it goes. So domain two, task one, execute project with the urgency required to deliver business value. So here we have to focus on the project execution. As we all know, execution comes after the planning. So while the project is being executed, there are many ways in which deliverables can be given to the customers. So they could be given in bits and pieces, or they can be given as a single final product. Right? Sometimes they can be given as updates. So imagine you are a mobile phone manufacturer. You update the phone with a particular version of a software and then deliver it to the customer. So a few months later, you work on an update like 2.0 and then send the new version of the software to the customer for the update again. So the actual phone that you sold, it's still the same, but the value of the product is increased after the software update. So this example is not possible in every case. So imagine a car manufacturer asking the customer to just take the wheels first and then we'll send the parts later, right? So it doesn't work that way. So again, all these examples that I'm giving are quite exaggerated. You can actually use these strategies within the project. So what happens in the agile kind of working is that the stakeholders come up with a set of tasks they need to perform before the set target date, and these target dates are again in recurrence. Every 2 weeks a sprint will end, or every 3 weeks a sprint will end. So it is in such recurrence. When I say sprint, that is a set target date for a set of tasks, and there will be a scrum master who will be assessing the workload within the team, and then he will assign only those portion of tasks which are possible to be delivered within that 2 week sprint or 3 week sprint. So if we speak about manage project terms, this is something that is expected of us, right? So here the PMI is trying to introduce something agile. So earlier, this retrospection was not the part of project management. Now with the evolving trends, the PMI has included this agile methodology. Delivering only those set of tasks in order to ensure that the pace is going, the project is moving ahead. To ensure this agile methods come really handy. It is quite predictable. So let's take a look at what needs to be done in this task. We have to assess the opportunities to deliver value incrementally. We have to examine the business value throughout the project. We have to support the team to subdivide the projects, right, in smaller tasks as necessary to find the minimum viable product. In order to pass the exam in this task, we have to learn the ways to assess the deliverables, to assess the business value, and the ways to divide the tasks in increments. And here are also a few example questions that you might get in this domain. These examples are quite fictional, so don't expect the same or exact questions here. These are only to set your expectations.